Hello everyone, you are watching ITV Gold and I'm your host Aditi Lamba. Welcome to another exciting episode of Inside Scoop, where we bring you prominent South Asian perspectives on voices from our community to talk on issues that matter to us, that matter to you. Right before the year ended on Inside Scoop, I had the privilege and honor to get an advocate to talk to us about Muslim American voices and what is happening in the government while the year was wrapping up. Well, today on the show, while we kick off another amazing season of Inside Scoop, I have an honor of bringing and a very big privilege in bringing someone who has a very prominent say and a huge say in American voices, someone who's really worked with Sikh Americans, and today he comes to us to talk about certain important factors that are impacting the US government right now, while also impacting the Sikh American voices as well. Today we will talk to him about what it truly means to be a Sikh American in 2019 and what should these South Asian millennials really learn from these advocates and all of these people that are really trying to bring forth more voices. So with much ado, let's welcome on the show today. We have with us Amman Singh Seehra. He works for the US Department of Agriculture, who is currently impacted by the government shutdown, but he also works with SALDEF, a huge non-profit on Sikh American voices. Thank you so much for being with us on the show, Amman.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Beautiful. Amman, I know my intro was extremely long, but I kind of wanted to bring forth, the perspective that on the show, while we were wrapping up last year and while we are bringing on the 2019 spirit, it's very important for us to talk about certain issues that are impacting the community, but as well also impacting certain members of the community. So I really thank you for being on the show. But today, before we go into any more on Sikh American voices and a lot that we have to say about SALDEF, I would really like to briefly discuss with you about the current government partial shutdown that has actually impacted your department that you work for. You are the senior program specialist at the US Department of Agriculture, and currently it's impacted by the partial shutdown. So just starting the interview, please give us an insight into what has exactly happened in the department and the impact of the shutdown on the 800,000 workers that we're talking about.
Sure. So for people who don't know, the government was shut down on December 22nd. Originally, the Senate had passed a measure to have a continuing resolution that would have went until February 8th so they can resolve their issues during that time frame. However, the president decided to shut down the government, which is going to be the third time in 2018 alone that the government has been shut down. But what that means is that federal employees cannot go back to work. That currently affects 800,000 federal workers. And something that some people may not know is that about 420,000 of those federal workers still have to go to work but are not getting paid. The other 380,000 employees are just not allowed to go to work, including myself. And federal employees believe in the mission of what they're doing. They want to go to work, and the shutdown is really having some real impact on these people. These are real people with real jobs and real responsibilities, such as paying their mortgage, their rent, trying to put food on the table for their families. And not only is it federal workers that are not being affected, but it also affects people outside of the federal government, such as janitorial staff, cafeteria staff,
right.
Any other support staff that isn't considered a federal worker. Particularly in the DC area, there's a lot of restaurants and other businesses that rely on federal workers to provide their business. Those are people that are not going to get any type of back pay, or they're just losing out on business and basically not having a way to make that up.
And we have you talking to us on a weekend that many, on national media are talking about how the 800,000 workers, the federal employees, will not get their paycheck this weekend. And that's a huge amount of stress. You work with so many people that are working in the department. You yourself have been impacted. What are the conversations that are happening amongst the people, the federal employees themselves? And if you could share with us or with the audience of ITV Gold of what it feels like to go through this right now, I'd really appreciate.
Yeah, so for us, we have a tight-knit community of federal workers. So we've been in contact with each other, and also with the help of our union, which is the American Federation for Government Employees, which has helped provide us with a lot of advocacy as well as advice of what to do during these times. So a lot of federal workers are going on unemployment benefits just to have some kind of income come in. Some of them are working with their banks with a promise that they'll eventually get back pay and able to pay back these essentially short-term loans.
Right.
But a lot of it is just that support, because a lot of these people are going through really tough times. They rely on this income just to have their household run, pay that mortgage, pay that rent, get food. But we're working together. I know a group of my fellow employees went down to a march in Philadelphia yesterday to kind of show their support, show that they believe that the shutdown needs to end. If people want to have discussions about the budget, pass a continuing resolution, and do that not while affecting federal workers and their families.
When we are talking about this, I would like to take this part of the interview to sort of get your personal view into exactly what should be the corrective measures right now. This shutdown is now on its 20th day. Yesterday, even on my news segment, I was talking about how now we're on the 19th day, and perhaps there were some conversations happening which didn't lead anywhere. What could be done in order to, one, stop this right now, get everybody working, and also how do you think this will impact once you are back at work after so many days?
So I think the first thing is that the Senate passed a measure, a funding measure that would have had a continuing resolution go until February 8th. That was introduced by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, approved by both Republicans and Democrats. I think that's one step that's already out there that can be taken so that this can be negotiated and they can work out their differences, not while affecting federal workers. And also right now it seems to be that a lot of people are focusing on the $5.6 billion in regards to the wall. But when you look back on the last time we had a long-term federal shutdown in 2013, that lasted, I think, was about 16 days. And the estimated effect to American taxpayers was close to $24 billion just from being shut down.
Wow.
So at this point, I think that we're affecting so many different people. Back in 2013, that shutdown stopped NIH clinical trials so that cancer patients couldn't go into these trials. Hundreds of students who wanted to go into the Head Start program were delayed for 9 days, and that's a program that's helped low-income families and children eventually reach higher graduation rates. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, couldn't do thousands of site visits, which enforce our environmental laws, including OSHA, which ensures workplace safety, couldn't do thousands of their inspections, making sure that workplaces are safe for Americans. So there's a lot of kind of services that are not happening during this federal shutdown. And I think the best thing is to end the shutdown as soon as possible so that federal workers can go back to work and they can negotiate this during a continuing resolution or just some other point. This is not even about the federal employees at this point being inconvenient. You're saying the entire departments are, they're moved. People are going to take a very long time in order to get back. Is that something that is of some concern? At this point, it's hard to tell what it's going to take to kind of come back. Again, this is when we come back, we'll see where it is and just kind of continue. Because at this point, once there's a lockout, workers are not allowed to go to work. They're not allowed to access information on their computers. They cannot use their work computers. So it's hard to keep track of what is the work that's being packed up. So your department and you currently are not doing any work related to the U.S. Department of Agriculture because you're just not allowed to do that. Yeah, and we're not allowed to, yes. So when you do go back after the shutdown is over, there would be piles and piles of work waiting for you. Lots of emails, yes. Wow. And just talking a little bit more about your work, I mean, I would definitely go a little bit more into exactly what is happening with the government shutdown and the sentiments with it. But, you work with the U.S. Department of Agriculture with low-income families. A lot of the work is on child hunger. A lot of, beneficial work for the community, as well as at times the problems like these kind of get disregarded in so much of national dialogue that happens. Tell us a little bit more about your work and, when this government shutdown has happened, what kind of impact has it had on these low-income families and other aspects that you work with? Sure. So I work for the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture Food and Nutrition Service, which is, and my particular office is based out of New Jersey. So we work with a lot of state and tribal governments, as well as public, private, and nonprofit partners to make sure that we increase food security and reduce hunger for low-income families and children throughout the country. And we do it in a way that inspires public confidence and supports American agriculture. Our goal is to kind of end hunger as well as decrease obesity, and we do that through 15 federally administered programs.
Right.
Some of those programs include Women, Infant, and Children. So programs targeted towards postpartum mothers, young children who are at risk, breastfeeding mothers as well as non-breastfeeding mothers. We also have the school meals programs, which include the National School Lunch Program and the School Breakfast Program, which services low-income students within the school districts. We have summer feeding programs as well, which helps bridge that gap when students are not in school to get food, as well as many other programs, including our biggest program, which is SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which is formerly known as food stamps, which services around 46 million people throughout the country.
Wow, yeah, and that one program you said has been definitely impacted while the shutdown is going on. How has the Department of Agriculture handled all of these clients and these partners you have had during this shutdown?
Honestly, we don't know because we're not at work. A lot of times we kind of oversee what the states and tribal governments do, so they can continue to process. But we really don't know what's going to happen going forward just because there's nobody there at work to kind of handle these programs.
Well, we have a lot more to talk about with this government shutdown and also on Amman's extreme amount of work in Sikh American Voices. Come back to us on Inside Scoop. We'll be right back. And welcome back. You are watching Inside Scoop. Right now, we are joined by Amman Deep Singh Seehra. He is coming to us, talking to us a lot about the government shutdown as well as Sikh American Voices. Amman, thank you again for being on the show. Right before the break, we were briefly reflecting upon what your work has entailed in the U.S. Department of Agriculture and how that has been impacted while the partial, government is in partial shutdown. Right now, after the break, I would sort of like to change topics and change gears a little bit and talk to you a little bit about your nonprofit work, which is a huge part of perhaps what you do currently, in the U.S. Department of Agriculture as well. You have been a huge part of SALDEF and other Sikh American organizations, and you have been a huge advocate for Sikh American Voices. Where has this passion come from for you? And talk to us a little bit about all of the work that you are currently involved with when it talks about Sikh American education, cultural awareness, and sort of integrating those parts into the community.
Sure. So for me, my Sikh identity was a big part of me growing up.
Yeah.
Having a turban in schools with just a handful of other Sikh students, you couldn't get by without someone saying like, why do you wear that? And I think answering that thousands of times you realize that you're always an advocate for your faith, you're an advocate for your beliefs and your morals. I think I took a bigger step in that after 9/11. At the time I was in my first year of law school and I was actually considering going to medical school, and the day after 9/11, I could walk down the street, people started throwing rocks at me, throwing stuff at me. I'd walk into an elevator, everybody would walk out.
People threw rocks at you?
Yeah, you hear stuff on the streets all the time, people yelling, screaming, cases of road rage. There's just so many things going on, and it felt like, this is not right. I'm born and raised in New Jersey. I consider myself as American as I can get.
Right.
And realizing that Sikhs are part of that American fabric, I felt like I just need to act and do something about it. So I contacted SALDEF and began volunteering for them back in 2001. And it's been about 17 years, I believe, now that I've been volunteering for them, and we've expanded what we do, and they've done so much work for so many years.
Yeah.
Some of the programs that we focus on is our Sikh Lead program, which focuses on Sikh youth, getting them involved in politics, policy, also developing their leadership skills. We have another program called the Sikh Vote program, which focuses on getting Sikhs to be represented at the polls. We have a partnership with law enforcement where we do thousands of law enforcement trainings. We've also done trainings with the TSA and other federal organizations.
Right.
And a lot of other advocacy projects that we have lined up to make sure that the image of Sikhs and their understanding is better appreciated by the American culture.
I'm just talking a little bit more about this. Diversity and inclusion is a huge part of your life motto. Anytime anyone reads on you on Google, that's all, it's stated there. When you have done over 15 years of work, especially in this, this one part of raising awareness on Sikh American population. What do you think are their concerns right now while you do, communicate with the population? And where do you think a lot of the responsibility for you lies when you are talking about Sikh American voices with all the work you've seen and all the things you've experienced personally as well?
Yeah, I think that it's such a big focus. I think now, particularly in this time frame over the past 2 years, there's been a rise in hate crimes, a rise in incidences against all sorts of minorities. And I think that now is the time that we need to act. A lot of people voice their frustration. They may do so on social media. They may do so talking to their family and their friends. But there's only so much that saying stuff is going to make a difference. It's about acting, showing up to events, showing up to different advocacy events, making sure your voice is heard. And part of our job with SALDEF is to amplify that voice, to make sure that that voice is being listened to by key people, and also making sure that Sikh Americans, as well as all minorities, are in that decision-making process. They're more involved within all sorts of American life.
And just, having talk to you in regards to this and a little bit more on SALDEF. Their mission I'm reading right now is optimism, humility, and service. I've had the privilege and honor of sitting amongst some very prominent advocates and voices for Sikh American voices, and that is one theme I keep on seeing: optimism, strength, humility, service. When you look at Sikhism and the faith and what it brings to the table and the positive messages, how does someone who is getting discriminated at, or who is who has these fears because of their representation, how do they take these values and sort of combat that? What's an advice you'll give to these individuals?
I think that that concept of Chardi Kala, or eternal optimism, is such an important role for all Sikhs. And I think that it's such a massive asset for anyone who has dealt with any type of discriminatory issues as well. Because a lot of the times, whenever someone has some kind of incident, they react negatively, impulsively, and I think that optimism allows you to view it from a different lens and realize it as a teaching moment. So whenever you have that issue or incident, you look at it as a moment to correct it instead of get mad and frustrated, but to see that there's an opportunity for learning, an opportunity to educate, an opportunity to make a difference. And that's that mindset, I think, that provides an optimal place to make a difference in this world.
So, just talking a little bit more on this, how important do you think it is for people or individuals that face discrimination, or that could be facing bullying, or any kind of targets due to their physical representation, be it a Muslim American, a Sikh American, a Hindu American, or a Christian American? How important do you think it is at this point in 2019 for them to speak up, perhaps reach out to personalities like you, or in SALDEF, or even in the government? How important do you think that is?
I think it's extremely important. There's such an underrepresentation of, an underreporting of different incidences that occur, and I think that in order to correct these, it needs to be properly measured. And even within our mission statement, it's to empower Sikh Americans by building dialogue, deepening understanding, promoting civic and political participation, and upholding social justice and religious freedom for all Americans. So it's not just about Sikh Americans. It's about working and partnering with all those other organizations, Muslim Americans, Jewish Americans, Christian Americans, and making sure that we all can work together to make sure that everybody's rights are being upheld. So first step is, if you have an incident, report it. And no matter how big or small, report it to not only to different organizations. SALDEF, we do a lot of reporting, but there's a lot of other Sikh organizations and Muslim organizations that track this as well. But also report it to your local police department, regardless of how small or little it is. I know, at least for myself, growing up and hearing a lot of these things within schools, within life, you kind of become a little bit numb to them. You try to avoid them. At some point you progress and learn, this is a learning experience. But you have to make it part of your conscious decision to be like, I should also report this. It's not just about dealing with a situation in the moment, but reporting it so that future generations understand that this is a problem and that it can be corrected. It's not just for yourself, but for helping others to make sure that it can be measured and reported.
Raising awareness is a very important thing. It is very important. A lot more on how to raise these awareness and how to educate and empower coming right after a short break. Stay with us on this very interesting and very empowering segment of Inside Scoop. And welcome back again. I'm Aditi Lamba and you are watching Inside Scoop. Currently we are joined by Amman Singh. Seehra, he is talking to us a lot on Sikh American Voices as well as the government shutdown. Amandeep, we discussed a lot on the shutdown and its impact, and also Sikh American Voices, two very important aspects of your life. But I wanted to sort of use this part of the segment to really get a little bit more into your personal perspectives and how your journey has been. You've done so much work in so many different fields, but they kind of correlate. Working for Sikh American Voices while also working in the federal government. There's a lot that I can see that you're involved in. You work with the New Jersey Leadership Forum as well. My question to you right now is, with all the work you've done, how do you think us South Asian millennials that are looking up to you or individuals that you are working with, how do you think all of us should now mobilize? There's clearly an issue of race discrimination. There's other issues happening in the nation on the government side. Some people say it's an immigrant problem with the border building, with the 5 billion asked. Some people say this is just how it is. How should we all mobilize according to you?
I think it's a couple of things. First, I think it's about understanding and being better educated. It's about understanding what the real issues are, having a deeper understanding of it. And secondly, it's not only looking at this from an education perspective, but also considering it a career path, going into politics, going into policy, going into media, going into all these other different forums and having a voice, having a say, being part of that decision-making process. And at SALDEF, we have a program called the Sikh Lead Program, where we get young Sikh Americans and place them in legislative internships. Over the summer, we have placed, this past summer, we did 10 interns in the DC area and 10 interns in New Jersey as well, with a bunch of state and local legislators as well. Another part of that is leadership development, to give these young Sikh Americans the tools to be able to become leaders within their particular fields. And also work with another program, the New Jersey Leadership Program, which we do the same thing for South Asian students here in New Jersey. We provide them with these leadership training, get them to have these mentors, meet with different leading personalities, and really understand what's involved in that decision-making process so that they can be more impactful in their community. But aside of that, it's just about acting. It's about going out, volunteering. There's an issue that moves you, act on it. Volunteer on some organization that's going to help you to move that issue. Be a part of that process from an advocacy component, and maybe if you love it, it's something that you choose to do in your career. But it's really just about making that extra effort, participating, going to events, volunteering.
We're coming towards the end of this interview, and it's been great having you here. What's one message you like to give out to South Asian parents, to South Asian children, to the community that is talking about their role and responsibility in 2019?
Yeah, I think the community has such strong feelings about so many things, and it's about how do you express that. I think it's about working with these organizations that do a lot of this good work, supporting them both financially and as volunteers. About if there's an event, asking for South Asians to show up, make sure that you show up. Take that time out of your day to show up to those events. Show that you want to be heard, that you want to be listened to, and it makes a difference. When you bring out people in large groups, decision makers see that and they understand that you have a voice in this community and your voice should be heard, and you're the types of people that are going to make a difference. So go out there, act, volunteer, participate, donate, whatever it is. That's how you can make your voice be heard.
You have to give action somewhere. The action has to happen. Well, thank you so much for being with us. And I have actually one last question for you that I was saving for the end of the show. According to you, and in your personal opinion, what is a Sikh? What is the faith of Sikhism, according to you?
For me, the biggest component is it's about respect and treating everybody with respect. So that means, and part of that is having service for those in need. It's about respecting everyone. A lot of it is having that optimism whenever you come into a situation where someone says something bad to you, but you still have that respect for them to say, you know what, I'm going to make this a teaching moment. And I think it's that respect for all people, regardless of the situation and where you are, that kind of defines a Sikh.
Well, thank you so much for being with us on Inside Scoop.
Thank you.
Well, that was none other than Ammandeep Singh, Seehra. He spoke to us, very heartfelt interview, spoke to us about many sentiments for the Sikh Americans and many sentiments for what it really means to have respect, humility, service, gratitude, and volunteerism. Well, we hope you enjoyed this part of Inside Scoop. Stay with us on ITV Gold as we bring you so much from our voices, your voices, our voices on our community. I'm Aditi Lamba signing off.